It was one of those evenings where everything looked perfect from the outside. The grand hall glowed with golden light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, and the soft sound of laughter filled the air. It was a charity gala, organized by one of the city's richest families, and every guest there carried an air of confidence, the kind that came from money, fame, or power. The long tables were decorated with white roses, candles, and tall glasses of champagne. Waiters moved quickly but quietly, making sure nothing went wrong. Among them was a young woman wearing a simple black uniform, her hair tied neatly back and a small notepad tucked in her apron. She looked calm and polite, but her eyes had a quiet sadness that few noticed. Her name was Lily. Lily moved between tables, serving drinks and clearing plates while the soft music of a grand piano played in the background. The pianist, an elegant man in a tuxedo, played beautifully, earning polite applause every now and then. Everyone admired his skill, his confidence, and the way he made it all look effortless. But as Lily passed by the stage, she couldn't help slowing down for a moment, watching his fingers glide over the keys. There was something about the piano that always drew her in, a feeling she couldn't explain. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Her mind drifted back to her childhood home, a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a small second-hand piano her father had once found at a thrift store. She had spent hours sitting at that piano, teaching herself to play, dreaming of one day performing for people who would really listen. But dreams had a way of slipping away when life got hard. After her father passed and her mother fell ill, Lily had to stop her music lessons. Bills piled up and she started working to support the house. Music, though still in her heart, became something she kept quietly to herself. A loud laugh from one of the tables brought her back to the present. The guests were talking about the performers scheduled for the night, professional musicians, singers, even a violinist flown in from abroad. Lily smiled softly as she poured wine into glasses. She didn't belong to their world, and she knew it. But still, every time the piano played, she felt like a part of her was still alive, the part that refused to stop dreaming. Later in the evening, as the pianist took a short break, Lily carried an empty tray near the stage. Her eyes lingered again on the grand piano, shining under the soft light. It looked almost magical, like it was waiting for her. She stood there for just a second too long. A group of well-dressed guests sitting nearby noticed her gaze. "Hey," one of them said with a laugh. "You look like you want to play." Lily blinked, realizing they were talking to her. "Oh no, she started. But before she could finish, another man joined in with a teasing smile. "Come on, let the waitress play a tune for us," he said loudly, drawing attention from the nearby tables. A few people laughed. Someone even clapped mockingly, as if inviting her to perform. Lily's face turned red. She shook her head quickly. "I can't," she said softly, trying to walk away, but the teasing continued. "What's wrong? Scared?" "Don't worry, we won't judge," another woman said, her tone playful but sharp enough to sting. Lily gave a small, polite smile and walked away as fast as she could. Her heart was pounding, not from anger, but from a strange mix of embarrassment and longing. Part of her wanted to sit at that piano and show them she could play. Another part of her knew it wasn't her place. She was there to serve, not to be noticed. She returned to the kitchen area, setting her tray down quietly. One of the older waiters noticed her flushed face and asked if she was okay. Lily nodded quickly and tried to act normal, but her mind kept going back to the piano and the laughter. As the night went on, the crowd became louder. The pianist returned and played a few more pieces. The guests clapped politely between conversations, barely listening. But Lily noticed every note, every small mistake, every change in rhythm. She could almost feel what he was playing. She didn't just hear the music, she understood it. At one point, when the pianist finished a lively tune, the host took the microphone to thank everyone for coming. He mentioned that there would be one final round of performances after a short break. People clapped and began to mingle, moving around the hall, chatting and laughing. Lily stood near the back, refilling glasses and tidying up. The piano sat quietly now, shining in the soft light, almost calling out to her again. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped a glass. She told herself not to think about it. It wasn't her moment. She didn't belong on that stage. But something deep inside refused to stay quiet. That feeling, the same one she used to have as a child when she first touched the keys, was back. As she worked, she overheard a group of young guests talking about the earlier teasing. "I can't believe she actually looked like she wanted to play," one said with a laugh. "Maybe she thought she could impress us," another replied mockingly. People should know their place. Their words hit her harder than she expected. She wasn't angry, just disappointed. Not in them, but in herself for walking away. She looked back at the piano again. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was impossible. But for a brief second she imagined herself sitting there, her fingers moving across the keys, the room going silent. Not out of pity or surprise, but because they could feel her heart through the music. The thought made her smile just a little. The break stretched on. Guests chatted near the buffet tables, the pianist still nowhere to be seen. The stage stood empty. The host was busy speaking with the event organizer. Nobody seemed to be paying attention to the piano anymore. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she placed her tray down. Her heart beat faster. She didn't plan to do anything, and at least not yet. But the thought wouldn't leave her mind. She walked past the stage one more time, this time slower, as if pulled by something invisible. Her reflection shimmered on the piano's glossy surface. For a moment she reached out and let her fingertips lightly touch the edge. It was warm from the lights. Just that tiny touch brought a flood of memories. Her father's voice, her mother humming in the kitchen, the sound of her own laughter as a child when she first played her favorite song. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere in the distance someone laughed again, but this time she didn't flinch. She just stood there for a moment, calm, her heart whispering a silent promise, one that even she didn't fully understand yet. The night wasn't over, and neither was her story, because deep down, beneath the quiet uniform and polite smile, there was a spark waiting to rise, a spark that no amount of laughter could ever put out. The room buzzed with chatter and laughter as guests continued to mingle during the short break. Waiters moved around carrying trays of desserts and drinks, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the air. But Lily barely noticed any of it. Her eyes kept drifting toward the stage, where the grand piano sat under the warm golden lights, untouched and waiting. She stood near the corner, pretending to be busy wiping a table, but her heart was restless. The pianist had stepped out for a long time, and no one seemed to care. Music had stopped, but no one missed it, except her. For Lily, the silence felt heavy, like something beautiful had suddenly disappeared. She thought about the laughter from earlier, the people who mocked her for even looking at the piano. Their voices still echoed in her head. A part of her wanted to forget the whole thing, to just finish her shift quietly and go home. But another part, deeper and stronger, whispered that this might be her only chance. Her hands were trembling slightly. She pressed them together, trying to steady herself. She could almost hear her father's voice in her memory, gentle, calm, and full of warmth. "If music lives in your heart," he used to say, "don't let anyone silence it." Those words had stayed with her through all the years of struggle, through long nights of washing dishes, waiting tables, and dreaming of something more. As she stood there lost in thought, one of the older waiters passed by and noticed her gaze fixed on the piano. "You play?" he asked quietly, not in a teasing tone, but kindly. She hesitated, then nodded. "A little." "I used to," he smiled. "Then maybe you should remind yourself what it feels like." She looked at him in surprise, but he had already walked away, blending back into the busy crowd. Her heart began to pound faster. For a moment she just stood there frozen. She knew she could get in trouble. It wasn't her piano. This wasn't her stage. But deep inside, she also knew she couldn't walk away again. Not this time. The pianist was still gone. The guests were busy talking. No one was watching her. Taking a slow, deep breath, she stepped toward the stage. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. A few people glanced her way, but no one paid much attention. When she reached the piano, she stopped for a second, staring at the glossy black surface. It looked almost unreal up close. Elegant, powerful, and full of memories she thought she'd buried long ago. Her fingers shook as she reached out and gently lifted the piano lid. The soft creak of the hinge sounded louder than she expected, and a few heads turned toward her. "What's she doing?" someone whispered. Lily's throat went dry. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should just walk away. But then she remembered the laughter, the teasing voices, and the quiet ache that had lived inside her for years. She pulled out the bench and sat down. A few nearby guests noticed and started whispering. Some smiled, others chuckled. "Oh no, she's actually going to play," one man said under his breath. Lily closed her eyes for a moment and took a long breath. The noise faded away. She let her hands rest lightly on the keys. Just the touch of them sent a rush of emotion through her. It felt like coming home. At first, she only pressed a few keys softly, testing the sound. The notes echoed faintly in the large hall. Conversations began to quiet down as people turned to look. Then she started to play. The first melody was gentle, uncertain, almost shy, but it carried something pure and real. The laughter stopped. The guests watched as her fingers began to move faster, smoother, more confident with every passing second. The music grew warmer, fuller, and deeper. It wasn't a song anyone recognized. It was something of her own, a mix of memories, emotions, and dreams that had lived inside her for years. Every note seemed to speak. It spoke of her childhood, of long nights practicing on an old piano that barely worked. It spoke of her father's encouragement, her mother's quiet humming, and all the times she wanted to give up but didn't. It was joy and pain and hope all mixed together. People stopped talking. Some even stopped breathing for a moment, afraid to break the magic that filled the room. Her fingers flew over the keys like she had been born for it. Every movement was effortless, every chord perfect. But it wasn't just skill, but it was soul. You could feel the story behind every sound. The same guest who had mocked her earlier now stood frozen, their eyes wide in disbelief. One of them leaned over to another and whispered, "She's incredible." Even the host, who had been speaking with someone across the room, turned to watch, his mouth slightly open. The pianist, who had just returned from the hallway, stopped in his tracks when he heard the music. He stood there in silence, realizing that whoever was playing wasn't just good, she was extraordinary. Lily didn't notice any of them. She wasn't playing for an audience anymore. She was playing for herself, for all the times she'd been told she wasn't enough, for all the dreams she'd buried to survive. The music rose higher, faster, stronger. It filled every corner of the hall, wrapping everyone in its emotion. Then, as if telling a story that had finally found peace, it softened. The melody slowed, the notes became lighter, fading like the last rays of sunset. And then, silence. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The entire hall stood frozen in awe. Then came the sound of clapping. Slow at first, then louder and louder, until the entire room was filled with applause. People who had laughed at her earlier now clapped the hardest. Some even stood up cheering, unable to hide their amazement. Lily sat there breathing heavily, her fingers still resting on the keys. She didn't smile right away. She just sat quietly, taking in the moment, her heart full. Then she looked up and saw the faces in the crowd. Every pair of eyes was on her, but this time there was no mockery, only respect, wonder, and a little guilt. The pianist slowly walked toward her, his expression soft and humbled. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "Who taught you to play like that?" She hesitated for a moment, then smiled shyly. "No one," she said softly. "I just love music." The audience, still clapping, heard her words and cheered even louder. The host took the microphone and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's give another round of applause for this young lady. The most unexpected and amazing performance of the night." Lily stood up, unsure what to do. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, but as she looked around the room, something changed inside her. The fear, the doubt, the shame, and it all faded away. For the first time in years, she felt seen. She gave a small, humble bow, then stepped away from the piano, her hands trembling not from fear this time, but from joy. As she walked back toward the service area, the guests still clapped behind her. One of the waiters smiled proudly. "I knew you had something special," he whispered. Lily smiled back, her eyes shining. In her heart, she knew she had just done something she would never forget. The laughter that once surrounded her had turned into applause. And the piano, the same one that had seemed so far out of reach, had become the place where she finally found her voice again. That night, something in her life quietly changed, not because people saw her differently, but because she finally remembered who she truly was. For a long moment after she stepped away from the piano, the applause still filled the hall. People clapped not because they felt sorry for her, but because what they had just witnessed touched something deep inside them. The music she played was not about perfection. It was about feeling, honesty, and courage. Lily quietly moved toward the side of the room, her heart still racing. She wasn't used to so many eyes on her. She wanted to hide, but at the same time she couldn't stop smiling. The sound of the clapping stayed in her ears long after it faded. The host came over, still holding the microphone, and said to the crowd, "Can we have another round of applause for this amazing young lady?" The guests cheered again, louder this time. Many of them stood up. Some of the women even had tears in their eyes. Lily stood there awkwardly, unsure what to do. She looked down and gave a small bow, her face flushed with emotion. When the applause finally settled, people began to come up to her. A man in a dark suit said, "That was incredible. You played with such emotion. Where did you learn?" She smiled politely and answered softly, "I used to play when I was younger." A woman nearby shook her head in disbelief. "Used to? My dear, you play better than most professionals I've heard." Lily thanked her but didn't know what else to say. Compliments felt strange. She had never played for attention. For her, music had always been something private. A quiet escape, not a stage performance. As the evening continued, people couldn't stop talking about her performance. Conversations that once revolved around money, business, and travel now turned toward the young waitress who played like a master. Even the professional pianist, who had returned just in time to hear her last few notes, looked humbled. He came up to her, smiling kindly, and said, "You reminded me why I started playing in the first place." Those words touched her more than any applause. The event went on, but something had changed. The atmosphere was warmer, lighter. Guests seemed more connected, more human somehow. It was as if her music had pulled everyone out of their polished routines and reminded them of something real. As the night drew to a close, many of the guests came to say goodbye to her. Some slipped her small notes with kind words. Others asked if she had a social media account or a place where she performed. She didn't. In fact, she didn't even have her own piano anymore. When the hall finally emptied, the other workers began cleaning up. The lights dimmed and the sound of sweeping replaced the chatter. Lily helped gather glasses and fold napkins, though her mind was still replaying the moment she sat at the piano. It felt like a dream, one she didn't want to wake up from. The older waiter who had encouraged her earlier came up beside her, smiling. "You see, I told you. Sometimes you just need to remind yourself of who you are." She smiled back, her eyes a little teary. "I almost didn't do it, but you did," he said. "And that's what matters." As she walked home that night, the streets were quiet. The cold air brushed against her face, but she didn't feel it. Her heart was still warm. She thought about everything: the laughter, the fear, the music, the applause. For years, she had convinced herself that her dream didn't matter, that surviving was enough. But for the first time in a long while, she felt alive again. The next morning, she woke up early and headed to work as usual. But something felt different. When she entered the hotel, a few of her coworkers clapped softly. Someone had already heard about what happened at the gala. "You're famous now," one of them teased gently. "The guests can't stop talking about you." Lily laughed shyly, shaking her head. "Famous? No, not me." But she could tell that the way people looked at her had changed. There was a new kind of respect. Quiet, but real. Later that afternoon, while she was setting up tables for another event, the manager approached her. He looked more serious than usual, but not angry. "I heard what happened last night," he said. The guests were very impressed. "You brought something special to the evening." She smiled, not sure how to respond. The manager hesitated, then added, "One of the organizers asked for your contact information. They said they might want to reach out about a future event." Lily blinked, surprised. "Me?" "Yes," he nodded. "Apparently you've made quite an impression." When she was alone again, she stood still for a moment, trying to take it in. It didn't seem real. All she did was play. That's all she ever wanted. Just to play. That evening, as she walked through the hotel lobby, she noticed a few guests looking at her with recognition. Some smiled, others gave small nods of respect. It felt strange, but not uncomfortable. One older woman stopped her and said softly, "I was there last night. Your music reminded me of my husband. He used to play for me when we were young. Thank you for bringing that memory back." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. Moments like that meant more to her than applause or attention. It was proof that her music had touched hearts, and that was enough. That night when she got home, she sat by the small window in her room, looking out at the quiet streetlights. The sound of the city outside was faint, almost like background noise. She rested her chin on her hand and thought about how everything could change from one small act of courage if she hadn't listened to that voice inside her, the one that told her to play. None of this would have happened. Days passed, and word of her performance spread quietly among people who had been at the gala. Some even posted short clips on social media. One video showed her sitting at the piano, playing with her eyes closed, completely lost in the music. The caption read, "The waitress who made everyone cry." It started gaining views. First a few hundred, then thousands. The comments were filled with people praising her passion and humility. Some said her music gave them goosebumps. Others said it reminded them that talent can come from anywhere. Lily didn't know about it right away. But one morning, a coworker showed her the video. "You're all over the internet," he said with a grin. "You've gone viral." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Watching herself play on that big stage felt surreal. She looked so calm in the video, but she remembered how terrified she had been inside. By evening, local newspapers were already calling the hotel, asking about her. People wanted to know who the mysterious waitress was. Some even wanted to interview her. Her manager called her into the office and asked if she was okay with the attention. She nodded slowly, still processing everything. "I just wanted to play," she said quietly. "That's all," he smiled. "And that's exactly why they love you." That night, Lily walked home under the stars, holding her phone tightly with the video still open. She replayed it one more time, not to see herself, but to remember that feeling of freedom she had when she touched the piano. The world around her had changed in ways she never expected, but deep down she was still the same, the girl who loved music, who played from the heart, who once believed her dreams were lost forever, and now, for the first time in years, she dared to believe again. The next morning, Lily woke up with a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had barely slept, her mind still filled with images from the gala, the grand piano, the warm lights, the faces of the guests, and the music that had carried through the hall. It had felt like a dream, and yet the applause, the kind words, and the unexpected recognition had all been very real. As she walked to the hotel for her morning shift, she noticed people glancing at her differently. Some nodded politely, others smiled warmly. It was subtle but unmistakable. There was a new awareness in their eyes, respect, curiosity, and even a touch of admiration. She wasn't used to being noticed for anything but her work, and it made her both anxious and proud. Her coworker, who had first shown her the viral video, caught her near the elevators. "Have you seen this?" he asked, holding out his phone. On the screen, the video of Lily playing the piano was now racking up thousands of views. Comments streamed in from all over, some praising her talent, others expressing how moved they had been by the emotion in her music. People wrote about how her performance made them cry, how it reminded them of forgotten dreams, and how it gave them hope. Lily stared at the screen, speechless. She never imagined that something she did on a whim, simply following her heart, could reach so many people. It was overwhelming yet thrilling. Throughout the day, her manager approached her several times. "You've made quite an impression," he said, smiling. "Several people from the event organizers are asking if we can have you play at future events. They want to feature you more prominently." Lily felt her stomach twist with nervous excitement. She had never performed in front of such a crowd before, and the idea of doing it again was both thrilling and terrifying. But deep down she knew she wanted to. Music had always been a part of her, even when life forced her to put it aside. By afternoon, the video had spread beyond the hotel. Local newspapers picked up the story, calling her the pianist who stunned a ballroom full of the wealthy. Social media accounts shared clips, and people began posting comments expressing their amazement at her talent. Some called it a once-in-a-lifetime performance. Others said she had a gift that needed to be shared with the world. It all happened so quickly that Lily felt dizzy. She was still the same girl who worked long hours, served drinks, and wiped tables. Yet everywhere she went, whispers followed her. Eyes lingered and cameras occasionally pointed in her direction. She realized her life was changing, even if she wasn't sure how to handle it. A few days later, an email appeared in her inbox from a local music school. They had seen the video and wanted to offer her lessons and guidance. They wrote about how they believed in her potential and that she could develop her talent even further. Lily read the message several times, unsure whether it was real. She had given up on her dream so long ago, and now it seemed as if it was being offered back to her fully formed and ready to grow. For the first time in years, Lily allowed herself to dream again. She thought about what it might be like to learn more, to explore the music she loved so much, and to perform in front of audiences who appreciated her. She could feel the spark inside her heart growing stronger. The hotel, meanwhile, was abuzz with excitement. Guests who had attended the gala still spoke about her performance, and staff whispered among themselves about the viral sensation in their midst. Even the regular patrons who came to the hotel noticed a difference. Some asked if they could hear her play during their visits. Others simply looked at her with admiration. One afternoon, as she walked through the lobby carrying a tray of glasses, a young woman approached her. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "I watched the video of you playing and it made me cry. Your music reminded me of my mother who loved the piano. You've given me something I didn't even know I needed." Lily felt her eyes water. She wasn't used to people being so honest and open with her emotions. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm glad it touched you." The next week brought more surprises. A local TV station contacted the hotel, asking if they could interview her and film her playing the piano. At first she hesitated. She wasn't a performer, and the thought of cameras and microphones made her nervous. But the memory of the gala, the feeling of playing and being heard, gave her courage. She agreed. The interview was small but meaningful. She played a few pieces, her fingers gliding over the keys with the same grace and emotion as before. The camera crew was quiet, careful not to interrupt the flow of her music. When the segment aired, the response was overwhelming. People from all over the city, and even from other countries, sent messages praising her talent. They shared the video hundreds of times, spreading her story further than she could have imagined. Through it all, Lily remained humble. She didn't play for fame or recognition. She played because music was her heart, her escape, and her voice. Every note she touched carried a piece of her story, her struggles, her dreams, and her quiet hope. With each passing day, her confidence grew. She practiced whenever she had free moments, sitting at the hotel's piano after her shifts ended. Sometimes she played for herself alone in the empty hall, letting her music fill the quiet space. Other times she would play softly in the lobby, just for the guests who happened to pass by. People stopped to listen, often silently, letting the music wash over them. Her life was changing, but in ways that felt natural. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a musician, someone whose talent could touch hearts. And yet she stayed grounded, knowing that her worth wasn't measured by fame or recognition, but by the music she played and the joy it brought, to herself and to others. One afternoon, an older man approached her as she set up chairs in the hall. He held a small notebook in his hands. "I saw your video," he said gently. "I'm a composer and I'd like to work with you. I think we could create something beautiful together." Lily was speechless. She hadn't expected anything like this. She had only wanted to play the piano once more, not to have someone recognize her potential so fully, but she felt a surge of hope and excitement. Perhaps this was the beginning of something she had always dreamed of, something bigger than she had allowed herself to imagine. That evening, after another long day at work, she sat by the window in her small apartment. The city lights twinkled outside, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She thought about the gala, the laughter that once filled the room and the music that had silenced it all. She thought about the messages, the emails, the interviews, and the people whose hearts she had touched with her playing. For the first time in years, she felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with survival. She felt seen, heard, and appreciated, not for her job or her appearance, but for her talent and her heart. The world was opening up to her, but she also understood that this was just the beginning. She would have to work hard, practice even more, and face challenges she had never imagined. But for now, she allowed herself to feel proud, to feel hope, and to believe in the power of her own music. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she smiled softly. The piano was no longer a distant dream or a memory of what could have been. It was real, and it was hers, a part of her that had never left, waiting patiently until she was ready to embrace it fully. Her journey had changed, her life had shifted, and the laughter that had once echoed in the grand hall had been replaced by something far more powerful: belief, wonder, and the undeniable beauty of music that could move the soul. The day finally came when Lily was invited to perform at her first official concert. She had never imagined this moment would happen so quickly. Just a few weeks ago, she had been serving drinks and clearing tables, her talent known only to a handful of people. Now she was about to sit at a grand piano in front of an audience who had heard of her music and were eager to witness it in person. She arrived at the concert hall early, her hands trembling slightly. The hall was magnificent, a place she had once only dreamed of stepping into. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting light onto polished wooden floors. Rows of seats stretched out, filled with people who had come to hear the young pianist who had captured hearts at a charity gala. Backstage, Lily took a deep breath. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself of everything she had been through. All the years of practicing alone in small rooms, all the times she had doubted herself, and all the moments she had feared being laughed at. They had all led to this. She was ready. The stage manager gave her a nod, and it was time. She walked forward, the applause already starting as she approached the piano. For a brief moment, she froze under the lights. The hall was bigger than any room she had played in before. There were cameras, microphones, and hundreds of expectant eyes. But then she remembered her father's words, her own quiet promise to herself, and the courage that had brought her here. She sat down. Her fingers touched the keys, soft at first, finding their place. A hush fell over the audience. Lily closed her eyes, letting the music flow naturally. She didn't think about the crowd, the cameras, or the pressure. She thought only about the sound, the melody, and the story she wanted to tell. The first notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but filled with emotion. Then as she continued, the music grew stronger, more confident. Every movement of her fingers carried a piece of her journey. The struggles, the laughter she once endured, the long nights of practice, and the quiet dreams she had never let go. The audience listened in silence, captivated by the depth of feeling in each chord. People who had never thought about the heart behind music now understood it. They could feel her story in every note, every pause, every soft touch of the keys. She played a piece that combined everything she loved about music: soft melodies that whispered, fast runs that sang with energy, and chords that resonated deep in the chest. For Lily, it was more than a performance. It was a conversation between her heart and everyone who was listening. Backstage, the pianist who had once performed at the gala watched quietly. He smiled, remembering how she had played in the empty hall just weeks before, unsure of herself. Now she commanded the stage with grace and presence. Her talent was undeniable, but what impressed him most was her courage, the way she had taken her gift and shared it fully, without fear. As the final notes faded, the hall remained silent for a heartbeat. Then a wave of applause erupted, louder than anything Lily had ever heard. People stood to cheer, some clapping, others wiping tears from their eyes. The music had touched something deep within them, a reminder of hope, beauty, and the power of following one's heart. Lily stood slowly, her hands still hovering above the keys. She bowed, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had never experienced before. She looked at the audience and saw genuine admiration, respect, and even wonder. The laughter that once tried to push her down had been replaced by recognition of her courage and brilliance. After the concert, people approached her one by one. Some offered kind words. Others shared stories of how her music had moved them. A young girl whispered, "I want to play piano like you one day." Lily smiled, touched by the simple honesty. "You can," she said softly. "You just have to keep trying." News outlets covered the performance. Videos of the concert went online, spreading rapidly. Comments poured in from people around the world. Some spoke of being moved to tears, others of rediscovering their love for music. Many praised her humility and sincerity, noting that she played not for fame but for the love of music itself. Even though her life was changing, Lily stayed grounded. She still worked at the hotel, still served drinks and cleared tables. But now she did it with a quiet confidence. People who once ignored her now treated her with respect, but she never let it make her proud in a way that felt arrogant. She remembered where she had come from, and that kept her humble. Over time, more opportunities came. Music schools offered her scholarships. Composers invited her to collaborate. and directors asked if she would perform at their events. Each time she considered the offer carefully, making sure it aligned with her passion rather than her desire for attention. She wanted to continue sharing her gift with honesty, not to chase fame. At home, she kept a small notebook where she wrote music, sketches of melodies and ideas for pieces she wanted to create. Sometimes she played late at night when the city was quiet, the only sound being the soft notes of the piano echoing through her apartment. Those moments reminded her why she had begun playing in the first place, for love, for expression, for herself. One afternoon, she returned to the same gala where her journey had changed. The grand piano awaited her in the familiar golden light. She sat down not to perform but to remember. Her fingers moved over the keys lightly and she felt the old thrill, the joy that had always lived inside her. She smiled softly, knowing how far she had come. The people in the audience that day, many of whom had attended her first performance, watched her play again. Some recognized her immediately. Others were surprised by her talent. But the smiles, the quiet awe, and the respect were the same. Lily realized that music wasn't about impressing people or seeking applause. It was about connection, honesty, and sharing a part of oneself. Years later, Lily became known not just as a pianist, but as someone who reminded the world that talent could come from anywhere. She performed in concert halls, small community centers, and even charity events, never forgetting the fear and doubt she had once felt. She encouraged young musicians who struggled, sharing her story of courage and persistence. Her life had changed in ways she never imagined. But what mattered most was not the recognition or the opportunities. What mattered was the courage to sit at the piano that night, the bravery to play despite fear, and the honesty to let her heart guide every note. Lily had discovered something essential. True genius is not measured by wealth, fame, or privilege. It is measured by the courage to follow one's heart, to share one's gift, and to move others with the beauty that lies within. And every time she played, whether for hundreds of people or just for herself, she remembered that first night, when laughter tried to stop her, and music saved her. Her story became an inspiration, a reminder that even the quietest voice can be heard, even the smallest act of bravery can change a life, and that the heart, when guided by passion, can leave the world speechless. And as she sat at the piano, surrounded by applause, smiles, and gratitude, Lily knew one simple truth. She had found her place, not by fitting into the world as it expected her to, but by embracing who she truly was and letting her music speak for her.